Hello, everyone, and thanks for the opportunity to speak with you today. Thanks to our hosts, ICT and IDC, for having me come speak. I haven't been to Israel before, though a confession, I spent quite a lot of time in the Mediterranean as a U.S. Marine aviator, but that was on a floating ship in the middle of the sea. And I could see palm trees in the distance, which led to a lot of frustration, a little bit different from the Danakadia, where I'm staying. I think I'd prefer the hotel to the ship. I'd like to talk to you today about the importance of international cooperation and leveraging law enforcement capabilities to mitigate the terrorist threat. For those of you unfamiliar with DHS, we were formed up in the wake of 9/11. There are 22 components, about 240,000 people in different agencies, and it consolidated key agencies involved in protecting the border, doing investigations, but our primary mission is counterterrorism, protecting the homeland from attack and being able to be resilient and recover. And so we're responsible for, among other things, maritime and aviation security, border security, chemical, biological threats, protection of our national leaders with Secret Service, protection of critical infrastructure, training our federal personnel, and responding to natural disasters through FEMA. You've heard Secret Service, FEMA, Homeland Security investigations. So the increasingly global nature of the commerce and internet, infrastructure, and travel makes strategic international partnerships vital to our success in our endeavors. The interconnected nature of world economies, global infrastructure, means that seemingly isolated events often have transnational origins and transnational effects. The result is that the accelerated flow of ideas and goods and people around the world create security challenges that are borderless and unconventional. So according to the old logic, you would harden your border. That happened after 9/11, where we shut down our border and inspected every vehicle coming across. We shut down all air traffic into and out of the United States. I think it was 3 days at that time. And there were miles-long backups of commerce, just-in-time delivery, people. Industry was losing millions and millions a day, and sort of gave al-Qaeda the very effect that they wanted to have, a small success by our action, inadvertently. So as an indirect consequence, we learned that security of any nation must begin and end not at their hard border, not at the geographical boundary that defines them. Rather, the border has to be the last line of defense if we're talking a geographic border. So we have to identify and analyze the movement of goods and people internationally at the earliest point of travel before arrival at the border. And in the United States, there was a case involving an individual named Abdul Muttalib, the underwear bomber, who intended to blow up a flight. He had explosives in his boxer shorts. And, we identified him after takeoff through our holdings and in collaboration with some other agencies. And our intention was to send him on arrival into secondary inspection for an in-depth scrub interview process. Any of you who've flown into the US, you go through a primary line and then into secondary if you're so selected. Now, but the problem was he was going to blow up the plane before he ever got to secondary. And so we needed to have a think on when do we ask for advance information? When do we need that information? Obviously before takeoff coming to the United States. So the reality is that worldwide movement of people and commerce leave the flow of people and goods increasingly vulnerable to terrorists and transnational criminal networks and other malefactors who want to exploit weaknesses in the seams in between nations. Now look, in the United States, like in Israel, we're busy. DHS on an average day screens, I think, 2 million some odd passengers overflying, coming into, leaving the United States. We screen 1.8 million passengers and their bags at 448 airports in the United States. We patrol 3.4 million miles, square miles of U.S. waterways. and we seize 500,000 in currency every day, and we have 70 cyber attacks a month. So we're busy, and I know you're busy. So, but this flow, this just nonstop flow of people and goods needs to be analyzed, and it needs to be looked at, I think, as a continuum. Some people say from cradle to grave. That's a little scary if you're a flying passenger. But from the point of origin in your travels, whatever route you may take or whatever route cargo might take until you arrive at your destination. So risk-based targeting is how we do that. And you can look at risk-based targeting as the needle in the haystack. And you can either examine every single piece of straw, and you will find that needle, but I think the example of 9/11 shows you that that's impossible without shutting down world commerce as we know it. You would shut down your border. You can rely on intelligence to extract with great precision the needle from the haystack, but intelligence is imperfect. I think we'd all agree on that. There are gaps in our intelligence. We don't always share intelligence fully. So that might be good in some circumstances, but it's not a layered approach. Or what I'm proposing is you can reduce the size of the haystack, and it's easier to find the needle. And you do that by implementing security measures focused on the cargo and the people about whom you know, the low-risk people, and the ones you don't know, who are the higher-risk people. And a perfect example is JFK Airport. 50,000 people arrive a day. If we take 10% of those people through one of our vetted traveler programs, just 10%, 5,000 people, that's 7 jumbo jets of people Customs and Border Protection does not have to analyze. They've been cleared already. Now we can concentrate more on the other 40,000 people who are arriving, which isn't easy. So this third approach, reducing the size of the haystack, is sort of emblematic of the way that we're now looking at our borders. And 3 quick examples. Abdulmutalab, the underwear guy, awakened DHS to the idea of borders as flows, and that a physical border is a last line of defense. Some of you might remember Faisal Shahzad, who parked a van at Times Square intending to set off the vehicle IED. That illustrates the use of advanced passenger information, although he was in the United States. In that case, we found his vehicle in Times Square, and we were able to ascertain a phone number associated with the purchase of that van. Good old-fashioned police work. That phone matched information that CBP had obtained from Shahzad earlier when he arrived in the United States. There wasn't enough to deny him entry or to do anything more, but the notes were, this guy is odd, here's his phone number, here's his information. Well, we had a hit on that phone number. How do we know that? We have a name matched to a phone number associated with the purchase of the van. And later, when Shahzad went to depart the US through JFK, he ordered a ticket online. And the passenger name record, advanced passenger information, pinged against our targeting algorithms, and that phone number popped up, and we removed him right before the flight took off. So I'd say that's a success, and there was a lot of luck and then the grace of God involved. But it shows the importance of having that information which you could data mine. The Yemen toner cartridge plot. We had information from the intelligence community that certain terrorists wanted to put explosives into toner cartridges, like printer toner. And we put lookouts in the system, but we also worked with the industry, DHL, and some of the just-in-time delivery people, FedEx, and we were able to stop all those toners before they got onto any planes. And so that sort of is evidence of working with the industry, sharing information. And people say knowledge is power. I would say knowledge is power only if you share it. And what good is it if it's sitting in a box? So by identifying the high-risk and the low-risk goods and travelers, we effectively can mitigate the threat posed by the former while expediting the movement of the latter. So if you accept the premise that our security paradigm is shifting from operating along lines, i.e. borders, towards implementing a risk strategy to assess the flow of goods and people, then you must recognize that international partnerships are vital to countering transnational threats. As we increase border security and put more and more effort to that, we have to look beyond our physical borders. We're actively engaging our international partners to identify and interdict threats at the earliest possible point, sharing more information with the partners, working in joint capacity with international partners and feds. And it doesn't have to be, I want your database. It can be what we call swivel chair connectivity. I can turn to you and say, what have you got on this guy? Or what have you got on this guy? If we agree that we can have the conversation. A few years ago, we weren't having that conversation. I had many fights. I was a professional pugilist with other agencies in my own government over who owned the info and who could use what with it. I've got many scars from that, and things are much better now. So if we establish strong information sharing relationships with our international partners to identify threats before they become a direct threat at our own border, in other words, focusing on the flow of people and goods between us multilaterally, we get away from focusing on the threat unilaterally at our own border. So we have to find ways to exchange information expeditiously. Now that might be through a mutual legal assistance treaty. We do that with Israel all the time. That's a formal process. It's onerous. It takes a lot of time. I think more importantly, we need to explore the more nimble police-to-police relationships where we can say, I've got some information you might be interested in. I don't want anything back from you. Take the information and run with it, and vice versa. Or do you have anything? I'm looking at narcotics, IPR, smuggling, drugs, what have you. Excuse me. So as a department that was founded to protect the homeland from terrorists, we have a plethora of ongoing efforts to address the terrorist threat. And it could literally fill books, and it's both very, very broad and very, very deep. From strategic partnerships, participating in established working groups, fusion centers, engagement with federal, state, international partners, we do quite a bit. And I don't want to get into that today because some of it's obvious and some of it's sensitive. But let me suggest that traditional law enforcement efforts at countering terrorism are a line of effort along the response continuum that produces concrete results worth discussing. So Homeland Security investigations, we prosecute, we go after about 400 statutes, but we look at terrorists under the theory that every terrorist is a criminal, but not every criminal is a terrorist. Another analogy is the Al Capone theory, a notorious gangster from the 30s, Prohibition, and we went after him for tax evasion, but we got him. The point is we got him, put him in jail. So we have numerous tools in our arsenal, and along that response continuum, you've got everything from criminal charges, smuggling, money laundering, to immigration violations, concrete tools that put people in jail. The U.S. interagency, and I found this out recently when I went to a transnational organized crime conference, and the entire focus was our old focus, the traditional focus of interdiction of narcotics on the coastal littorals, out at sea, and the biggest threat, you move stuff by container, with the highest profit margin for bad guys, whether it's a drug cartel or terror. So that's where the focus was. And I do think that interdiction is a critical piece at one end of that spectrum. But I think more important is the transnational criminal organization or terrorist ability to finance, procure, arm, move people. And that's how you disrupt and dismantle versus arrest, indict, convict. Arrest, indict, convict is an easy metric. You put people in jail at the end of the case, you start another case, I can tell my boss I arrested 10 people, 15. But disrupt and dismantle is a squishy metric. How do you prove you've disrupted and dismantled? It's a much tougher paradigm, and it's something we need to get our head around because you don't get credit for it as a street agent. And Rich Jollis here is a street agent, I'm a street agent. Believe me, if I said, hey boss, I've disrupted and dismantled an Iranian procurement network, they'd kick me out of the office unless I can show them a head on a platter, no pun intended. So critically, however, along the entire CT response continuum is the law enforcement response. Bringing traditional criminal responses has a better chance of putting someone in jail, conviction and incarceration. So whether terrorists fund their ulterior terrorist activities through narcotics, procurement of arms, money laundering, extortion, smuggling, we have the ability to materially affect, to disrupt and dismantle them, not by just the arrest of the individual on terrorism charges, which is hard to prove in a court of law, but on doing something other that funded the terrorist activity, which never even has to come up in court. In fact, you're better off not bringing that up. So let me give you 3 brief examples and then I'm done. We often partner with industry and NGOs to serve as a force multiplier in addressing both transnational organized crime and terrorism. We've developed very strong and deep partnerships with the financial industry to combat and target illicit finance, money laundering. And that's the real key to dismantling transnational criminal organizations. It's a symbiotic relationship with the banks. It provides Homeland Security investigations with reporting of suspicious activity, unusual patterns of money flow, strange geographic end users, and so we're choking off funding. 2, in one operation, HSI, Homeland Security Investigations, conducted a joint investigation that infiltrated a fraudulent document ring, right? Fraudulent documents. But they were involved in facilitating the travel of suspected members of several terrorist organizations. 5 defendants were charged in the U.S. for alien smuggling. 10 search warrants were conducted in South America that led to the arrest of over 60 nationals from the Middle East, Asia, and Africa. So we're choking off their ability to travel undetected. Money, undetected travel. Final example is HSI's Project Shield America, and I brought this up at a trilateral in London with the Israeli government a few months ago, and we're going to try to explore something along these lines. The Shield America is our outreach program, HSI's outreach program to industry, trying to protect our critical technology. So we work in partnership with U.S. industry, academic institutions, and it's our first line of defense against individuals who compromise U.S. security by violating export laws and embargoes. And since 2002, we've done about 23,000 of these. I can't tell you how many undercover investigations we've started based on leads from industry back to us on a weird request for quote, request for information. And in fact, HSI conducts about 72% of all significant DOJ export-related prosecutions. So we have some experience. It's my background. I spent 2 years as the deputy director over there most recently. I know this topic. And in one case, through interaction with governmental partners, we identified a trend in nuclear-related components being sought by the Iranian WMD program. Collaborating with U.S. manufacturers of these very devices, we were able to identify, and we did it through a Shield America outreach to several of these companies, we were able to identify a major international diversion network responsible for diverting thousands of U.S. origin items critical to Iran's effort to furthering its nuclear program. The investigation is ongoing, but results to date have led to arrests, identification of several entities involved in the diversion scheme, and all targets to date, by the way, were foreign nationals doing business overseas, leveraging third-party relationships that were advantageous for trade with the U.S. to develop their scheme. These are very sophisticated, bright people that need to be addressed piece by piece through criminal charges. And so the third is we're choking off their ability to have things that would give them a battlefield advantage. Money, movement, weapons. So where does that bring us? Just in conclusion, the power of information lies in sharing it. I really believe that. Informally, formally, layered approach, because without the information, you have real gaps and seams in your ability to address threats. We have to collaborate with one another. And finally, if the goal is to target, disrupt, and dismantle either transnational criminal organizations or terrorists, and terrorists are transnational criminals, I would say concrete criminal charges are much more effective than some other terrorist charges that might or might not be litigated successfully. So thank you very much.